The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is brought to you by Clinica Sierra Vista.
Welcome back to the 17 News at Sunrise podcast, where we share your news on your schedule.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
And good morning here at 5 a.m. Thanks for waking up with us. I'm Maddie Jansen anchoring from home. Alex Fisher holding down the fort in studio. Kevin, of course, on the road. So we can't wait to check in with him in just a little bit live once again. But first, our top story this morning, we begin with national news, as today President Biden will lay out a six-pronged strategy to combat emerging COVID variants and increase vaccinations to stop the spread. At the same time, pressure is building to offer further guidance for schools, with children now representing a quarter of all new U.S. COVID cases. Alice Barr has the latest from Washington.
Good morning, Maddie. With the highly contagious Delta variant still filling up hospitals and disrupting back to school and work plans, President Biden set to roll out a targeted approach to turn the tide against the virus.
The Biden White House today launching a new battle plan to combat the evolving threat from COVID-19.
We have more work to do, and we are still at war with the virus and with the Delta variants.
President Biden set to lay out 6 steps to stop the spread and increase vaccinations.
Some of that will be related to access to testing. Some will be related to mandates. Some will be related to how we ensure kids are protected in schools.
With largely unvaccinated students now back in the classroom all over the country, last week a quarter of all new COVID cases were among children. My child, my choice. A judge ruling Florida must stop enforcing Governor Ron DeSantis' controversial school mask ban after 3 Miami teachers and 10 other employees died from COVID since school began, all of them unvaccinated. The district superintendent slamming what he called the political nature of mask policies.
As an educator, as a father, it bothers me because children should not be political pawns in this political chess game.
Serious illness and death are rare among children, but more are winding up in the hospital, like 11-year-old Levi Cartucci.
It's past time for people to take the virus seriously. Like, it's affecting our kids now.
A parent's plea as the president pushes a new strategy in the war on COVID.
One key to that new strategy, President Biden wants to use public-private partnerships to increase vaccinations, especially among those under 40 who are still lagging behind. In Washington, Alice Barr, 17 News.
And taking a look at our local cases, we continue to see a daily uptick in cases in Kern. Public Health reported 555 new cases of COVID-19 yesterday, along with 1 new death. Nearly 1,500 people in Kern have been lost to this virus since the beginning of the pandemic. At least 117 people have died since vaccines became widely available. Public Health says 98% of people hospitalized with COVID-19 in Kern are unvaccinated.
5:04 is our time now, and a local group is demanding county supervisors have term limits, claiming the board has mismanaged and failed to provide competent leadership. United Domestic Workers represents more than 53,000 public and nonprofit workers in California. The union claims the Board of Supervisors is sitting on millions of unused funds while ignoring infrastructure and neighborhoods outside of the metropolitan area. They say term limits will bring not only new faces to the board, but provide positive change as well.
We see that our roads are crumbling. We see the rise in homelessness and really just a lack of services for our community. And I think it's time to move forward in a new direction. And we think that term limits is that step forward.
But not everyone agrees. Political analyst Kathy Abernathy says the board should be commended for saving money, adding, if this oil industry keeps getting shot at by Governor Gavin Newsom, there won't be any money to distribute. In your 17 Crime Watch this morning, a police chase caused a major traffic jam on Highway 178 last night. The chase ended on the Mount Vernon on-ramp of westbound 178 around 8:30. According to police, officers tried to stop the driver at Brundage Lane and Chester Avenue, but he took off. The chase lasted just 8 minutes, with the driver clipping an SUV on the freeway and then hitting a curb. He took off on foot but was taken into custody later.
And now to one of our signature issues here at TV17, pedestrian safety. We now know the name of a woman who died yesterday after she was hit by a truck in Northwest Bakersfield. 48-year-old Yvonne Vivas is one of 2 people killed in less than 24 hours in pedestrian accidents. 17's Christian Delano reports.
Go down on the floor, guys.
I don't believe there's a day that goes by where we don't receive a 911 call from a motorist that they're seeing pedestrians crossing the freeway or somebody's in the center divider of a freeway.
It's becoming common on the streets of Bakersfield.
I've had a significant number of hit and runs.
Tuesday night, a woman was struck and killed in a southwest Bakersfield neighborhood. That driver fled.
Whether you believe it's your fault or not your fault, again, you have to remain on scene. Now, if you're involved in a non-injury crash and you flee the scene, then that would be considered a misdemeanor hit and run crash.
Wednesday morning, a woman struck and killed by a 17-year-old driver in Northwest Bakersfield who remained at the scene.
Just keep your head on the swivel. Even if you're in that crosswalk, it still doesn't mean that you're completely safe. Always expect that a motorist is not going to stop for you, and just make that eye contact.
According to our tracker, this marks the 35th incident in 2021. It is well on its way to surpass last year's number. Fatal vehicle versus pedestrian incidents are on the rise since 2017. That's where we saw the most deaths.
And I can't stress it enough. It just takes 1 second. 1 second of inattention could be the difference between life and death, not only for the motorist, but also for that other person.
For 17 News, I'm Christian Galeno.
Your time now is 5:07. Firefighters continue to gain ground on the French fire burning west of Lake Isabella. The fire is now 76% contained. Full containment is projected for this Saturday. The French fires burned more than 26,000 acres since it began on August 18th. Investigators believe the fire is human-caused. And CalFresh says those who purchased food through their benefits program and lost that food due to power outages during the French fire can get their pantries restocked free of charge. We placed a link to apply for replacement food through CalFresh on our website, kget.com. Just click the hot link icon.
Houchin Community Blood Bank continues to struggle through the ongoing blood supply shortage hospitals are facing across the country. In a bid to increase blood supply, Houchin says it has joined a first-in-the-nation program known as the Blood Emergency Readiness Corps, or BERC. BERC is made up of 7 blood centers from 5 states that have committed to collecting extra blood donations on an on-call schedule. Any blood units they collect will be stored specifically for emergency use cases, such as natural disasters or mass shootings. Amid the COVID-19 pandemic, Houchin says blood centers across the country have been facing severe shortages that have strained what it calls the national safety net. As always, if you would like to donate blood, you can schedule an appointment at hcbb.com. And Tehachapi residents will have a chance to roll up their sleeves later this month. A blood drive will be held September 21st at Tehachapi Valley Recreation and Parks District's West Park. It is happening from 11 a.m. till 4 p.m. at 490 West D Street. To reserve a donation time, just head to our website, kget.com, or you can simply just show up.
Recapping our top stories on this Thursday. Excuse me. Today, President Biden will lay out a 6-point plan to combat emerging COVID variants and increase vaccinations. With largely unvaccinated students now back in the classroom all over the country, last week, a quarter of all new COVID cases were among children. A local group is demanding county supervisors have term limits. United Domestic Workers represents more than 53,000 public and nonprofit workers in California. The union claims the Board of Supervisors is sitting on millions of unused funds while ignoring infrastructure in neighborhoods outside the metropolitan area. A recall rally is being held today featuring candidate for governor Larry Elder. It will be Elder's 3rd campaign appearance in Bakersfield at Jastrow Park from noon to 12:30.
Time now is 5:31 and Saturday marks 20 years since the terrorist attacks on 9/11. The New York City Office of Chief Medical Examiner is still committed to identifying all of the victims, and he's getting help from technology that was not around 2 decades ago. NBC's Stephanie Gosk reports.
Medical examiners are not first responders, but that day Mark Desire went straight to ground zero.
when the South Tower cracked and I looked up, you were just under.
His team barely survived. It was the start of one of the most complex forensic challenges in human history. 20 years later, 40% of the victims are still unaccounted for.
I think for a lot of people, it's going to be surprising to hear that there are so many people who aren't identified.
Everything that destroys DNA was present at ground zero. So fire, water, sunlight, jet fuel, diesel.
Nearly 22,000 remains were collected in the years that followed. And while some families got the call, others, like the Stacks, did not.
I'm waiting for that phone call. Waiting. Hey, we identified a piece. But it never happens.
Larry Stack was a firefighter, 32 years on the job.
He rose up to the rank of battalion chief and loved every part of his job.
That love transferred to his sons, who are firefighters themselves. In 2001, Larry Stack was considering retirement.
While they were looking at the first tower burning, the plane hit the second one. He put the binoculars down, he looked at his guys and said, I think they're going to need us now.
Stack was helping an injured man when the buildings came down.
It was just typical of the kind of man he was. He would have never left.
They held a funeral in 2016, burying a blood donation Larry made before his death.
It was a sight to see.
Families like the Stacks are at the heart of the medical examiner's work.
We had to evolve. We had to push the science out of that necessity to make more IDs.
Just this week, they made two: Dorothy Morgan, an insurance broker, and another unidentified victim. The technology has come a long way, especially with extracting DNA from bone.
So this looks very different than it did in 2001.
Yes. Yeah, there's no mortar and pestle here.
Using fake samples, the lab showed us the process.
Being able to grind into that fine powder allows the chemicals to better act onto those, cells to extract the DNA.
And now, Desire says, new, more sensitive technology will give them an even better chance of making an ID.
I'm very appreciative of the work that they're doing.
These people trying to identify everybody, I think no one's ever going to forget.
Your office has described it as a sacred obligation.
We made a commitment 20 years ago to identify everyone, and that commitment is as strong today as it was 20 years ago.
His ripped jacket from 9/11 hangs in the lab. A reminder, there's still work to be done. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, New York.
Just incredible to see the amount of work that they have to do 20 years later. Our local firefighters are hosting two 9/11 Remembrance Ceremonies on Saturday. The ceremonies are open to everyone, and it is happening at Fire Station 15 on Buena Vista Road. The first is set for 9:30 in the morning, followed by an evening ceremony at 7. If you can't attend in person, the fire department will live stream the events. You can watch that on their Facebook page as well as the KGT Facebook page. And be sure to tune in to 17 News this Saturday as we take a look back on the tragic events of September 11th, 2001 and how it impacted us here at home. The hour-long special broadcast is happening from 9 to 10 p.m. right here on TV 17.
From our 17 follow-up file, new details this morning on a crash near Buttonwillow that left one person dead. It happened just before 7:30 a.m. on Interstate 5, just north of 7th Standard Road. And the California Highway Patrol says the driver of a Toyota Tacoma rear-ended a Dodge Ram, sending that pickup off the road, causing it to flip, ejecting the driver. CHP says the driver, a 32-year-old man, was not wearing a seatbelt. The name of the man who's died has not been released. In your 17 Court Watch now, a man who was arrested along with two teens in connection with a murder investigation appeared in court yesterday. 18-year-old Jaden Longmire pleaded not guilty to murder and attempted murder charges in the death of Alfred Lee Williams. It happened back on August 29th on South Owen Street. On September 3rd, Bakersfield police officers spotted a car matching the description of a vehicle used in the shooting of Williams and another shooting on August 28th. Police say Longmire and a 15 and 17-year-old all jumped out of the car and tried to run from police. Longmire is being held without bail and is due back in court next month. The two teens were taken to juvenile hall. A man accused of shooting and killing another man in a Delano cemetery is scheduled to appear in court today. 18-year-old Ray Anthony Torres is accused of killing Joel Santos Maldonado at North Kern Cemetery on the evening of February 5th. Police say physical evidence left at the scene and surveillance video helped them identify Torres as the suspect. After the killing, Torres fled to Ohio, where police monitored his whereabouts until evidence processed for DNA linked him to the crime. Once an arrest warrant was issued, detectives flew to Ohio and took Torres into custody with assistance from Columbus Police and SWAT. He's due in court today at 3 p.m.
Working in the spirit of the Golden Empire, this is 17 News at Sunrise.
The 17 News at Sunrise podcast is a production of KGET and Nexstar Media Group. For more on all of the headlines in today's show, head to kget.com.